Publitarian and a Republican. Welcome to Publitarian Podcast.
It has been too long, ladies and gentlemen. This is Ronald Johnson, Publitarian, coming at you again with another episode of Publitarian Podcast, and we are up to episode number 103. I don't have a title for this one yet. I have so much news, thoughts, and opinions that have backed up over the last month that I'm just going to get right to it. If it pertains to what's going on right now in the world, great. If not, oh well, you'll get an old opinion from an old news cycle, but I gotta get through some of this stuff. The Publitarian drink of the day is rum and coke, and it is a little early, but hey, I've got a podcast to do. Gotta be loose.
Doesn't anyone notice this? I feel like I'm taking crazy pills!
And that was a sound drop I left in from the last podcast, and apparently I'll just leave that in there. That's fine. Who needs editing? Anyway, moving on. Just a side note before I get into the main bulk of my podcast. The news has been so crazy and the media has been so overwhelming that I just have not had the motivation or emotions to deal and be able to record a podcast. So that's what's been happening. I just have not been able to deal to just, get a podcast episode out. So that's what's been going on. But I'm back on track, and we're going to get this out. I've got a couple of interviews coming up soon. What was funny, I thought 2020 was going to be the year for podcast interviews because everybody was locked down and at home, and just people's schedule, they got crazier, it seemed. And I just could not get my schedule aligned with other people's schedules, and therefore, I don't think I had any interviews last year except for Vince Dow. And speaking in the vein of being overwhelmed with media, what was funny, yesterday I was listening to a podcast and they were talking about the two states in the United States where incest is not illegal. And I'll just do a brief pause. Does anybody out there know what the two states are without looking? I know there's a lot of assumptions out there. But what are the two states where incest is not illegal? Playing the Jeopardy theme song here. You would be wrong. It's New Jersey and Rhode Island. That's right. Now, did your brain automatically go to some southern states? Did you automatically think Alabama or West Virginia or something like that? Why did you think that? A little bit of a media thought experiment here. Why did you automatically go to a southern state? Because you've been told for decades in media that the South is backwards, inbred, rednecks, racist that marry their cousins. There was a popular singer, musician in the 50s, 60s named Jerry Lee Lewis from the South, did marry his cousin, underage, as a matter of fact. And that one example has been echoed over and over again from media all around the world. Yes, it was shocking. Yes, it was scandalous. And because the media amplifies what they want to amplify, it's created a generation of people that think certain things about the American South. That's not true. So if the media can do that much damage, imagine what they're doing to your mind through the media that you consume. And I don't even mean political media. I just mean stuff that you think you're being entertained by. Anyway, that had nothing to do with the podcast. It was just a side note. I was just thinking about the media and how effective they are. Maj Touré, owner of Black Guns Matter, says media stands for most effective devil in America. And I think that's apropos. Anyway, that was a sidebar about the media. Moving on. Oh yeah, the movie Deliverance didn't help either. That was set in South Carolina, North Carolina. If you're too young to know, there was a movie. Well, I'm too young to know it, but there was a movie called Deliverance where there was this famous scene of sodomy, and it was perpetrated by two southern backwoods rednecks, and the famous "squeal like a pig, boy, line, and it's horrifying. Like, what's funny, like, stuff that happened this has nothing to do with nothing either, but like the movies in the 70s where like just people were just like, hey, let's just try this and see what happens, experiment with this and see what happens. Some of those movies, like, as far as shock value, still hold up today. Like, I would not watch like a sodomy scene from in a 2021 movie, much less what was happening with, Burt Reynolds and, God, who's the guy that famously got Ned Beatty. It's the only thing the poor guy's known for. Oh, gosh. Oh, John Voight was in that, too. Speaking of conservative actors. Anyway, that was a rabbit trail. But anyway, I just thought I would, like, bring up a little thing about the media. And I have been overwhelmed with media. And then it got me thinking about how everybody is overwhelmed with media. Everybody is oversaturated with media, which is funny because I'm producing media right now, giving you a podcast. So I'm trying to give you at least my perspective on it and condense it a little bit. That's why I like to do these 20-minute podcasts. I try to keep them at 20 minutes. And thank you for the new listeners out there. I got your DMs. Thank you for reaching out to me. And you've actually encouraged me to get back on here and start the podcast thing again, because it's been a month. So thank you for that. Anyway, enough of the ramble. Moving on. Actually, you know what? Most of this podcast is going to be a ramble this time with no structure, because like I said, I have so many notes. I'm just trying to get through them all and get the information out there. Right-wingers, conservatives, Republicans. I mean, we gave up media. I know, speaking about media again. We gave up media, art, literature, all that stuff to the left, because we said, and we still do say, I see it on like what you would call quote unquote right-wing social media, where they're like, oh, who cares? Who cares what Cardi B does? Who cares what this person says? Who cares about Satan Nike shoes? Yada, yada, yada. People care. People care about culture. If you can't understand that and you're all facts, data, and logic, that's fine, but you're only going to appeal to a small group of people. Most people like art, music, entertainment, stuff like that. Thankfully, we are starting to take it back. I am starting to see the tide change, and people become uncancelable, starting to do comedy again. Nicole Arbour's doing like these hilarious comedy skits. The Daily Wire, as much as I could take or leave Ben Shapiro, they're starting to, they signed Gina Carano on to make movies for them. Candace Owens is there. I love Candace. She also let slip that they're starting a record label, a music record label. That's a big deal. Like, we're starting to like fight back. Andrew Breitbart famously said that politics is downstream of culture. And politics, if you look at the root word, politics, it's public. Public. What are we talking about? What's happening in public? What do we consume in public? And the right forgets about that a lot, because they just want facts, data, and logic. Facts, data, and logic don't appeal to everybody. So if you can't see why we need the culture, that's fine. But you need to at least support it begrudgingly or be silent about it, in my humble opinion, because culture is how we will turn this ship around, in my humble tier 1 podcaster opinion. And in other news, as of the recording of this podcast, I'm sure that everybody has heard that Black Lives Matter now stands for buy large mansions, or buy large manors. I've seen that too. Patrisse Cullors, one of the co-founders of Black Lives Matter, now reportedly has 5 different houses, and they're big, they're sizable, they're all over the place, and they're nice pieces of property. And so Black Lives Matter, because of optics, now come out and said that she's not paid by Black Lives Matter. And then that prompted the New York chapter of Black Lives Matter to break from the herd and go, okay, well, speaking of which, where is our money? Like, all this stuff we've been doing, all this fundraising, where is the money? I mean, spoiler alert, I'll tell you where the money is. It's in the hands of white Democrat politicians. The Democrat Party has not changed, y'all. It has not changed. It's always been the party of, like, elite white people, basically. And it hasn't changed. The message has branded. They've taken this motley crew of fascists, communists, and disenfranchised people and like married them together and like this like a horrible marriage, and like convinced a minority population that they are being like disenfranchised and disadvantaged while disenfranchising them and disadvantaging them. Like if you ever want to, I'm not going to get into the race thing, but gosh, if you ever want to talk about systemic racism, that's like one of their famous buzzwords. I'll say, okay, systemic racism. So this whole thing, the problem that you're having in your life as an African American is systemic racism. Okay, what if I 100% give you that caveat and say, okay, that's fine. Now you have to be courageous and ask the question, who's running the system? Look around. Who's running the system? Look in these urban areas. Look in these blue states. Look at the justice system. Look at local police departments. Look at local unions. Look at the education system. Look around. Who is running these systems? If it's systemically racism, ask yourself who's running the system. I'll give you a hint. It's not Republicans. But anyway, back to Miss Patrice. She then went on a liberal talk show, and I got to give this talk show host credit because he was like, hey, how can you, as yourself, a trained Marxist, that's what you've called yourself. You've called yourself a trained Marxist. How can you, like, have all of this property and raise all of these funds through capitalism? Because what she says she's rich from is consulting. So she does, like, consulting for all of these, like, large firms. So he's like, how can you say you're a Marxist and have all of these houses and have all of this money? And she gets herself into this, like, circular pretzel logic and does a bunch of so in between the if I could pull up the video clip, I will, but you've seen it by now. She does like the word salad to try and get around the and then she never did answer the question. And then she kind of like backpedaled and was like, well, I help my family. I've got a brother who's disabled. I take care of my mom, and that's what I use this money for. Like, I help me and my family and black people that are in my family. And I'm just over here like, yeah, Patrice, we all like to do that. We all like to do that with our money. We all like to help people. You know how you help people like that? With capitalism. You don't do it with Marxism. Marxism will equal everybody out. It will make everybody equally poor. Who said that socialism is the equal distribution of misery? It was either Churchill or Thatcher, one of the Brits. But anyway, very funny watching her backpedal on that. Not to mention the obvious rules for thee, not for me. I can raise this money from poor people and black people, and I'm going to take that money and use it to better my life and my family, but not theirs. And then another popular topic I'm seeing in the conservasphere, podcasts, right-wing media, I'm seeing a lot of different versions of, like, quote, how do we fight back, unquote. So I'm going to try and do something unique on this podcast because I'm seeing, like, conservative podcasts, media, right-leaning media going, we need to fight back. How do we fight back? I mean, you know, a lot of us have been saying that for years. And I'm glad the right is, like, waking up to the culture phenomenon that they should have woken up to 40 years ago. But anyway, so what I keep seeing is, how do we fight back? How do we fight back? How do conservatives fight back? How do we win the culture war? How can we do this? How can we do that? And then if I listen to the podcast episode, there's really not any solutions. It's just a bunch of, like, conservatalk and platitudes. This is one of the things that Donald Trump was really good at. Like him or don't like him, he would just speak regular language to regular people. Yeah, he would like overtalk, over-explain sometimes, but the words that he used, everybody could understand. And I'm bringing this up because I saw yet another one of these podcasts labeled How Conservatives Can Fight Back. And it was by Andrew Klavan, and he's on the Daily Wire, and he does political podcast. So I thought I would give him another shot. He was really like an anti-Trump, like never Trumper. So I had a hard time listening to him, because anybody that's like anti-Trump that was a conservative, keep in mind here, I'm not like a golden calf worshiper, but I've maintained this, and I still will, that Trump was kind of like the divining rod. Like, if you supported him, then you got it. If you didn't, then you were always just going to be a talking head conservative and not understand it. And you're just being happy being, controlled opposition, so to speak. But anyway, I thought I'd give him another shot. He's one of these, Andrew Klavan, I mean. Anyway, so he's one of these like conservative intellectuals that kind of condescends and speaks down to people. And I don't like that. But I thought I'd give him another shot anyway, because anything that says, how can we fight back, I'm interested in seeing what they have to say. And sure enough, I fire up this episode, and he's still like dunking on Trump. And he was like stating this Gallup poll, which shows that more people identify as Democrat by like 9 percentage points. Okay, so anyway, first problem with that, Andrew, is that Gallup polls always skew left. And they always oversample left. So I don't even know why you're like quoting a Gallup poll. Next problem, people will openly tell you that they're Democrat because there's no like retribution for that. If sometimes people won't tell you that they're Republican just because they want to blend in and they don't want to deal with the bullshit. I can back that up, because there was a Trump phenomenon where people didn't admit they were Trump supporters for fear of backlash or what their neighbor would think of them. And it's why the Rasmussen polls and the Trafalgar Group polls were so like spot on about Trump supporters and what was going to happen in the 2016 election, because those polls asked, who do you think your neighbor's voting for? They were the only two polling groups that did that, Rasmussen and Trafalgar. And that's why, now to be fair, they also showed that in the 2020 election as well. But we'll get into all that other stuff on another podcast. Anyway, so Andrew Klavan's quoting this Gallup poll, and that's problem number 2. And then he said that he believes this poll because Trump alienated so many people. And I would argue that the only people that he alienated was Democrats that wouldn't have voted for him anyway, and a sliver of Republicans like him. But again, Trump had a 96% approval rating in the Republican Party, and then added 15 million votes, winning record for the most amount of votes and for an incumbent president that's ever been received. That's not alienating people. Not to mention hashtag Democrats for Trump, that there was a lot of Democrats that also voted for Trump. But that's inconvenient to the narrative, I guess. So another one of these conservative-like intellectuals that aren't in touch with people and are just going to appeal to a small base is still our voice. It's still our mouthpiece. And that's what I'm finding on a lot of these podcasts. It's like, how do we fight back? And then they give you a bunch of platitudes and don't really tell you how to fight back. So I'm going to tell you how to fight back. Maybe that's what I'll call the episode. How do we fight back? I don't know. I'll think about it. So point number 1 on this, fighting back. Herman Cain said this really well and very simple. The late Herman Cain. Save the savable. He would always say save the savable. What he meant by that was there are some people that are so deluded and have drank the liberal Kool-Aid so much so that you're never going to get through with them. So you don't waste your energy on those people once you identify them. Like if they're just a crazy, screaming liberal lunatic, nope, don't worry about them. But you will find that if you actually just have a conversation with people, Vegan Patriot, by the way, is great at doing this. I'm going to give her a free shout out. Just like going to these places and talking to these people. And a lot of times if you engage with somebody that's on the left and just talk to them, you'll find that you have some common ground. So save the savable is point 1. And I have been tribalistic on the podcast in the past. And I was like, no, maybe we need some tribalism. And I'm going to amend that. Because now after seeing over the past few years, there's a lot of people that identify as leftists that want the same thing that the right does. They want like affordable health care. And then we differentiate on what that looks like. They don't like big, large, evil corporations, where the right for a long time has supported these corporations because of capitalism. And now these corporations are doing what I told you they were going to do and stab you in the back. All the way back in episode number 4 of my podcast, where it was called The Answer is Yes, where I'm like, the answer is big government and big corporations. Big anything is your problem. The answer is yes. This is my problem. Yes. That's my problem. Yes. So we're starting to see that now, and a lot of the leftists are starting to wake up, and they're seeing what the country is turning into. Do we like a police reform? A lot of people on the right, when you use those words, they go, "Ooh, no, they're going to take our cops away." Now, the left ignorantly think that means that, they're going to fire all cops and replace them all with social workers, and we're going to have a utopia. It's just really hard for people to see like middle ground nowadays. All of us want like a better place and a better country. We just have very different ideas of how we get there. But if you can start engaging with the savable, start saving the savable, and I'm talking about like talking to local people in your community, and engage. Whereas before I would be kind of tribalistic, and I'm saying, hey, we've got nothing in common with these people. We do. I've talked with enough now to where, unfortunately, they've just been deluged with left-wing propaganda, and to where you can watch them just regurgitate the talking points of media. And it's not even like... I still think that people can be saved if you engage with them locally. So that's point number 1. Save the savable, and engage locally with people and talk to them. Talk to the people in your sphere, and don't be afraid to talk to people in your sphere. You'll be surprised how many conservatives you have around you that don't want to talk. And another thing, Dan Bongino talked about this before, like if you are arguing with a liberal, sometimes you're not arguing with that liberal to convince that liberal. You're trying to convince the guy or girl that's standing next to him that's listening to the exchange. The right always has facts and data on their side. It's just a lot of times how they present. So it's like my classic line about Alex Jones. Like, he produces facts. Like, he gives you receipts, but his presentation is like, they're building pig-human hybrids in China. And everybody's like, okay, Grandpa, go to bed. And then NPR just released the article the other day about pig and monkey hybrids being embryos being merged with human embryos in China, so they can start, learning about organs and harvesting organs. And I'm like, it's out there. Or the classic, they're turning the friggin' frogs gay. They really were putting chemicals in the water that, well, they weren't turning the frogs gay. They were making them asexual or hermaphrodites, I believe. But anyway, it's like, it's the presentation. Sometimes the presentation is what you got to get nailed down. I would say try and start engage locally. That's point number 1. Save the savable. And I'm not telling you to do something, obviously, that I haven't done myself. This is all, like, action plans that I've done myself. Like, there's a person in my local sphere that, like, loves a good conspiracy theory. Not a right-winger at all. So what I do is I talk conspiracy theories, and then I will insert some ones that the left think are conspiracy theories that really aren't. And just find some common ground with that. And it turns out I found out the person that I talked to, like, it at least listens to Joe Rogan. So that means that they're at least, like, questioning, like, everything that they hear. And I was able to throw in some of my other, like I said, what the left would call conspiracy theories that aren't. And it got them thinking. And they're like, oh, yeah, I need to go check that out. I'm like, yeah, for sure. And I'll check your stuff out too, And then we left with some common ground. And it's great. It works. It breaks down barriers. Point number 2, stop giving your money to these big corporations that do not care about you. Buy locally if you can. I know there's some things you can't do locally, like cell phone technology. It's either Apple or Android. There's not going to be anything else. Gab is flirting with the idea of having like a Gab phone. We'll see. Sometimes they bite off a lot more than they can chew. Stop giving your money to these conservative companies. These conservative companies. That's funny. Excuse me. These corporations that, or these conservative companies that don't actually share your values. Con Inc. But no, stop giving money to these big corporations that hate you and don't share your values. That's one of their buzzwords. These people don't share our values as a company. Where a company, I don't think typically should have any values. They're just supposed to be selling a product. I'm not talking about being like morally bankrupt, but at the same time, Coke, you're there to sell me Coke. I don't need to know what your stance is on every political issue in the world. Just sell me Coke. But Coke's not going to do that. MLB's not going to do that. Gillette's not going to do it. Nike's not going to do it. So there are plenty of alternatives out there for companies that are either apolitical or conservative companies. Now, when I come to this second point and I say stop giving your money to these people, don't think for a second that that's going to wake them up. Once you start hitting them in the pocket, but it'll start waking their shareholders up because shareholders want to make money. But the corporations, the boardrooms now are like populated with these ideologues. So don't expect them to turn tail. They will double and triple down. Even if Target lost a lot of money with their like bathroom push. Nike lost a lot of money with the Colin Kaepernick thing. What did they do? They made another Colin Kaepernick commercial. So don't expect them to like see the light. They're not going to. Unless they totally change, hands in their boardroom. And a lot of these corporations are in bed with China, taking money from China. And that's a whole other ball of wax that I could get into. I would recommend, for bonus points, going back and listening to my episode, Big Trouble in Commie China. That's another thing. All of these larger corporations are just sucking at the tit of China, and it's not good. So buy locally if you can. I know with the exception of technology, some stuff we can't. So that's number 2. Number 3, stop watching media that is mainstream that does not align with what you think. I'm not talking about closing your mind off to other ideas, but once you've been in the game long enough, like the conserva game, you can see like what media is good and what media is not. And there's a lot of alternatives out there now, like music wise. I check my Instagram feeds. I'm always like promoting like these artists. And like I said, again, I'm not even looking for like right wing country music flag waving, patriots. I just look for somebody that's not overtly Marxist. I mean, I've really lowered my bar. There is Akira the Don is out there. He's been around forever, and I mean, he's toured and produced like big names, like Miley Cyrus, like big names that you've heard of, like on the left. And he invented this new genre called meaning wave, where he takes like talks of like intellectuals and puts like this cool like vibey like music behind it, and it's really cool. He's one you could check out. Conservatives have got like the hip hop game locked down. You'd think it would be like country music, but oh my gosh, there's so much like good hip hop there. That's good. My boy Anish is one of them. Now he changes his name every day, so I can't even tell you where to go now to check his stuff. He was Annihilate. He's now Anish AK or Anish Sat. I don't know. He's all over the place. But I'll give him a shout out on another podcast if I get the name wrong. And then Topher Town Music is another good one. The Marine Rapper is a good one. Joel Patrick is a good one. I mean, there's so many. I know I'm not going to name your favorites, and I'm going to get some like hate mail about it. But like conservatives have got like the hip hop. Tom McDonald, they've got like the hip hop game locked, and it's good music, and it's not cheesy. It's just, and it's not like this overtly, proud to be an American. Not that there's anything wrong with that. I like that Lee Greenwood tune, but you know what I'm saying. You would think it would just be like country music, and it's not. We are starting to turn this around. So that was my next point was start supporting these artists, start giving your money to these artists, and stop feeding, again, this corporate leftist music industry. There's other streaming services that are coming about, but I'm not going to mention them because I haven't investigated them enough. But I will also, I am also working on compiling a list of just non-woke companies, non-woke media, non-woke, music, non-woke literature. And I'm going to start giving them shout outs. But I always want to check with them first before I do that, because they may not want the attention. Not everybody's ready for the fight. What's funny, Adam Carolla said, if you see a Hollywood person not speaking up about politics or being quiet when something's going on, 99% of the time they're a conservative. So sometimes people just aren't ready for the fight. It's okay. Now, like Bongino says, the fight's coming to your door, whether you like it or not. It's just, when are you going to engage is the only thing. And so those are some real steps you can take to fighting back. Of course, my next point would be vote, but you don't have to tell right-wingers to vote. They just go vote. But especially, I will encourage you, though, to pay attention to local elections. The next, George Soros push, and that the left is doing, is infiltrating local politics, especially in urban areas. They've been infiltrating urban areas forever, but now they're starting to go out into more suburban communities. And George Soros is giving big bucks to get these radical liberal DAs and justices, council people elected. And then the point I always make, especially to parents, get your kids out of public school. Get them out. Or this will bring me to my next point. I'll dovetail them both together. Either get your kids out of public school or have the courage to start going to these PTA meetings and start pushing back against racist theories like the 1619 Project and stuff like that. Because what these things do is they paint America in a negative light. And don't misunderstand, America's had its share of problems, but what happens with stuff like this is that they inflate the problems way bigger out of proportion and with no historical context, and without looking around at the rest of the world and see literally throughout human history how human beings, countries, peoples, leaders have behaved, and break it down to what I've called in other podcasts nano history, to where it's just I'm taking this one little capture and using it to illustrate my point with no context before and no consequences after. Start either get them out of public schools, government schools, by the way, and start either educating yourself, take them to private schools, or start going to these public schools and start pushing back against the stuff that these administrators want to push. Again, a lot of my action steps has been local, and that's because local is really important. What I think is going to start happening over the years to come, I'm not blackpilling here, but I think things are going to get worse. But what's going to happen is I think red states, red areas are going to get redder, and blue states are going to get bluer, and it's really important for you to be involved locally in your community so you know what's going on. So these liberal educators, liberal DAs don't get elected and start poisoning your kids and poisoning the justice system further or the body politic local with just leftist Marxist crap. And then the final action step, this is where conservatives and free thinkers kind of fall apart, because and I've said this a billion times on other podcasts, we do not have a herd mentality, and we're such critical and free thinkers that it's hard for us to get together as a group and come together on anything. Case in point, Donald Trump, he didn't do what gun people liked on bump stocks. So then we're just divorcing ourselves from Trump altogether. Well, okay, where are you going? Where were you in 1986 when machine guns were banned? Like, where have you been while your rights were being stripped away? The one of the few dudes fighting, you're going to throw him over the bus now? Just examples like that where we cannot come together, and we critically think too much, and we can't come together. So I would say, start to, like I was talking about Ben Shapiro earlier. Like, I can really take or leave him, but like if he's in the fight and he's really in the fight, and maybe not, maybe you like him, maybe you don't, but people on his staff, if they're in the fight, if they're involved, then you need to start supporting these companies and these people. So start coming together. That's where the left really has us on the ropes, is because a lot of us are so, I hate using the word puritanical, but it's like we have this set of beliefs, and if you do not 100% lockstep with these beliefs, then we will, form this tribal clique that you can't be a part of. And I see it happen all the time. Leftists can really come together. Now, there's starting to be some cancels on the left and some cannibalism on the left, just because it's an ideology that can't go on. But what I'm saying is I still think things are going to get worse before they get better. Now, I'm not a black pill. I don't think that things are going to get worse and stay worse. That's why I'm giving you these action steps so you can push back on this stuff. Because leftism needs, its currency is grievance. Its currency is these people have been oppressed. This person's been oppressed. This person needs to be canceled. That person is marginalized. You can only do that for so long before you run out of victims. Who was it that said, I think it was Thomas Sowell that said, if virtue signaling is the currency, there's going to be counterfeits. So, it's going to run out sooner or later, because there will be nobody left to marginalize. Everything is racist. Everything is Nazis. Everything. It's all over the map. So it will cannibalize itself. But if you don't push back while it's cannibalizing itself, it will have totally depleted the right and destroyed the engine of Western society. So it's really important to start pushing back and caring and doing these things, because the fight's coming to you whether you like it or not. Anyway, man, this turned into a rant. I was just telling you guys how I like to do 20-minute podcasts, and here we go, coming up on the 40-minute mark. Anyway, that will do it for me, I think, on this edition of Publitarian Podcast. If you want to reach out to me, you can. I'm publitarian@protonmail.com. I'm on all the social medias. Oh, that was the last point I wanted to make about the social medias. As of the recording of this podcast, the media is taking a victory lap about Mike Lindell, the MyPillow guy. He tried to get this social media off the ground on Monday. It's sort of there. It's coming and going. It's called Frank Speech. It's a little hokey in my opinion. No offense. Like I said, I'd be a hypocrite if I'd say don't get involved and do this stuff. So yeah, go check it out, please. It's a little hokey because he's it's total free speech. But you can't cuss, and you can't take the Lord's name in vain, and there's no pornography. And like I said, I'm not one of those that is a free speech absolutist, because that's also a slippery slope. There is no real free speech. Nobody can just say or do anything they want without consequence. That's always a dog whistle that gets people caught up in all of this wonkery. So anyway, I would still go check it out. It's called Frank Speech if you can get logged in. But like I said, the media is celebrating this because it went off to a rocky start. What I think happened is it got infiltrated by a bunch of trolls, and they attacked the hosting site and shut it down where it couldn't get off the ground. And a bunch of right-wingers are trying to, escape social media and go over to that platform, and that may have bogged it down too. But he's having a hard time getting it off the ground, so they're celebrating. But I think it was a coordinated celebration. So anyway, I said all that to say, my last point: get on these alternative social medias, even if they're not your favorite. Support them. Parler, I started off a strong supporter of them. I can kind of take or leave them now. You're not going to find the perfect social media platform. They all have their problems. None of them are total free speech, but like I said, it's such a I don't know if you want to call it a straw man. Like, we've never had absolute free speech in this country. And there's like people on the right that will tell you that we have, and we haven't. There's always been consequences for certain speech. So it's one of those things. But you can't have big tech fascists actually be squelching actual facts and data because it doesn't fit a narrative. That's where I fall apart. If you've got a handful of corporations dictating your news and what media you can consume, yeah, that's definitely a problem. So that would be my last point, is diversify yourself on the social medias, and don't be one of those people that are like, oh, they're a private company, they can do it. No, don't. I've gone down that rabbit hole with you guys a bunch of times on my podcast. Don't fall for that. That's just such BS. Social media is how people communicate these days. It is the public roadway that people communicate, and you can't just get off. Like, you have to engage. You have to be on these platforms, in my humble opinion. Anyway, that will do it for me on this edition of Publitarian Podcast. Man, that got ranty. But, it had been a month since I recorded one, so I might as well give you some extra. I do have some interviews coming up soon. I am working on that non-woke list of companies, authors, media, stuff like that you can consume and support. And I'll get back to you guys with that later. And I'll see you guys on the next episode.
Listening to Publitarian Podcast. Copyright 2021.